Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful and handsome co-host Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
We got an awesome guest on today. I'm going to kick it over to you for the intro here.
Yeah, we just had a pretty long pre-show talk. We're going to carry the high energy into this discussion, and not because it's fake. Somebody who has a lot of energy, which I love. A fellow New Yorker. Albeit a little bit south of me, but a New Yorker nonetheless. But tonight we're going to be joined by the Wofford Head Coach, JJ Edwards. JJ, thanks for joining us, man.
No problem, guys. So hopefully we can carry this juice from our pre-talk into this.
Oh, we will. It's going to be electric. But before we get going, could you just give our listeners a little bit of a rundown of your career and how you got to Wofford and how you've become the head coach?
Yeah, for sure. So, Glass, you hit it. I'm from Binghamton, New York. Went to Maine Edwell High School. Loved it there. Don't go back much because you come down here and you realize it's a lot warmer. Good for you guys. But played at Maine Edwell. Went to Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. Wasn't a very good baseball player. Thought I was a good baseball player, but big fish, small pond kind of thing. Went to Sacred Heart, had a good career, but I feel like it just clicked at the right time going into a good spot that, they were good and I kind of worked my way in, but ended up having a pretty successful career there. Went to a regional in 2011 in the NEC. Now they're jumping into the MAC, I think, next year. Got done playing in there 11, and then our strength coach got me a job for the Oneonta Outlaws and the NYCBL, now the PGCBL. And then when I went there, I actually coached our starting catcher at Wofford. And I was 23 years old, looking for a volunteer job at the time, and linked on with him. He got me in touch with Todd Interdonato, and they said, hey, would you want to come down here and work in Spartanburg, South Carolina and be our volunteer, which is now the third assistant? I said yes, got into an 07 Altima. Drove 11 hours and 45 minutes with everything I owned and stayed in an apartment, and then worked my way up. I was our volunteer for 1 year, the 12 season. And then the next 4 years, I was our second assistant hitting coach. And then Jason Burke, who was our assistant coach at the time ahead of me, left to take a D2 job at Lander. I jumped up to be our first assistant. And then I think did that for, God bless, 7 years. It sounds right, 7 years. And then became an associate head for a couple of them. And then Todd left to go to Boston College. And I was fortunate enough we had some success pretty much 2015 on. We had a lot of success down here. So they entrusted me to take over this program. And after year one, I didn't mess it up too bad. And we were fortunate enough to go to a regional and win 42 games and win a game in a regional, which Wofford College has never done. So that's how I'm here. Met my wife down here, have 2 kids and 2 dogs, and just put those girls to bed. And now ready to talk some baseball.
It's awesome. I did the same thing. I left. Well, 2 things I want to talk about quick, but I left the McLean Raiders in the now defunct Clark Griffith League in 08 and drove with everything I owned. And I'm not trying to one up you, like 19 hours down to West Alabama. And lived in a trailer.
You're winning. You can win that too.
Like,
I'm good.
I immediately pulled into the driveway of the trailer, and I was like, I should probably just get back in my Blazer and just drive back home. What are we doing here? But I'm super glad that I did it. But when you were at the Outlaws, was that still run by Dan Scaring and Keith Rogers when you were there?
It was. The Rogers was running it, but they were driving from where they're Albany guys, right? They were driving down. Yeah. So I didn't see them that much. Oh, man, I was a 23-year-old assistant that I think they paid me $500 to coach first base and throw BP, and I thought I had it all figured out. I didn't have any. We won the league. We hit 303. Did I take all credit for hitting 303 and having no idea? You bet your ass I took credit for that. But I had no idea what I was doing. They did a phenomenal job with it. I think that roster ended up with three major leaguers on that roster that was playing in the NYCBL at the time. And you guys have seen Sherrill's Field. Like, we were playing at Sherrill's Field, which is like 250 to right field. And like, if you hit a home run there, they counted as like a double. Like we showed up with 3 major leaguers on our NYCBL team to play at that field. So it was like the talent was phenomenal. And that's when Oneana just finished playing for the Tigers. Like the Tigers just left. So they had brand new clubhouse, stands were redone. Brooks's Chicken was there. Like it was kind of a whole shebang. And
they had the old New York League, because there still is a New York League, but the old New York League that you probably played in and I played in,
correct,
that transitioned into what is now the Perfect Game League.
Correct. And then the big boys all left. League.
But there is like the Rogers, like they run the South Troy Dodgers in Albany, like they're famous for all that. But no, like they got dudes, because I ended up coaching for them probably the following summer, or maybe 2 summers later. They moved to Saratoga, and we were in the NECBL. And we coached me and Garrett Barron, who was the assistant at Albany at the time. Like, I mean, we had a big leaguer on that roster, Matt Beatty, who played for the Dodgers. He out of Belmont. But like they found these kids that were on mid-major Division I, Division II, and Division III rosters that could flat out ball. And like they put together really, really, really good rosters. And it was always fun to kind of coach in the summer. But like, I mean, actually, and then Brian O'Keefe was on that team, who I think has had a cup of coffee in the big leagues, but he's been like a AAA, 4A guy for a long time as a catcher in the Mariners organization. Like there were some dudes on that team. Like, and I mean, the NECBL is legit.
Loaded. Loaded.
There's bros in that league all over the place. So like, it was super fun that summer, because I'd been out of coaching for about a year and then got back in, and then I started RPI that fall. But it was like just getting back in and seeing like that, like we had kids from Oklahoma State, Stanford, like.
That's it. That's what we had. Oklahoma State, Ole Miss. Who else do we have? Baylor, like Virginia sent 2 arms. And then you're just looking up and you go, and then they had all those big name schools, and then any small name school they had was just an absolute baller.
We had a kid, a New York, an Albany kid who pitched at Ithaca, was like a 2-time All-American, dominated the NECBL.
No doubt.
And you know, and I kind of know, and I coached Division II. Like I know that there's really good guys at all 3 levels, but like this kid came in, he was like all of 89, 91 with a slider, like just dominating the NECBL.
And those are the days that was hard.
Yeah.
Like you touched 90 back in like the mid 210s. And you're like, oh baby, like 91. And now you're like high school games at Perfect Game. And you're like 91. You're like, he'll probably end up D2, D3. Like that's where it's at right now.
Doesn't throw enough strikes.
He's a touch 93 and you're like, this is straight nitro right now. Like, looks like a BB out there.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right, to get into this, the first question we always ask everyone: how do you guys identify players to recruit at Wofford?
So ours is, I don't know, like I would love to go back and watch all your videos and hear what everybody is. Our vetting process is pretty intense, and more in the aspect of like, of course, we're a high academic school, ranked the #1 school in the state of South Carolina. So that is a big piece of it. Hey, what kind of class are you taking? Is it, hey, I have like in South Carolina, and I live in that state, and my girls are going to go to the school in this state. The GPA is a little fluffed. In this state, and that's fine, because just kind of where it's at. So you have to kind of see, is he taking APs? Is he taking honors? Is he an IB kid? You got to start sniffing through that, because like you'll get a lot of kids who are like, Coach, I'm a 4.3 GPA. And I'm like, what are you taking? And it's English, normal English, tech, computer. There's a couple of schools down here that like offer basketball and baseball as classes. So you have to like kind of sort through all of that. And then the other thing is like, do they value the education? Because there's a lot of people who go, yeah, I have really good grades, but I don't value education. And then you got kids who have average grades that go, no, I want to go to a really good school. So I think that is, of course, something that we have to do as an academic school. And then baseball wise, we value athleticism everywhere. And I get a lot. They're like, Coach, he's really fast as a catcher. And I go, yeah, I don't care. He's got to be fast if he was a shortstop. Like he's just got to be super athletic. And then we only recruit the middle of the field. I don't think we've signed a first baseman in my 13 years at Wofford College. It's just catchers, middle infielders, and center fielders. And we just branch them out after that. And you got to run, and you got to be super athletic, and you have to have a really high ceiling. And the line glass, sorry, dude, like, run for a catcher is not the same. Like you need to run. You need to run. So like, and that's the hardest one for us to find, because like we want catchers who run sub 7s, And that's hard because like you'll get the athletic kid who's like, hey, he's an athletic catcher, and you look up and he's 135 pounds. And you're like, yeah, he's athletic because he's really small. And then you get the other kid and you're like, he's 6'2", 240, and you're like, yeah, he can't move at all. So you got to kind of find that. But yeah, that's what we do. And then we'll look up, call families, call everybody. And then I heard it the other day. They're like, do you want high school stats? I go, hell yeah, I want high school stats. Like, I want all your stats. I want anything you can give me, because like somebody will send us a high school stat. And now you go hit 500. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Like, we're not going to recruit you off of that, but we will tell kids no off of high school stats. We've all seen the kid. I run a 6'7". I throw 90 from the outfield. I hit bombs in BP. Showed me your high school stats. 268. Yep. That's probably not going to hit in college. Like, you hit 268 in high school. I'm guessing you're not going to hit in college, just going on a limb. So like, more information for us, the better.
Yeah, I think I have a 6'9" on my record once.
Yeah. Downhill with some wind from the Hudson. I get it, dude.
Right. That said, a little peek behind the curtain. Andy and I were just cutting a couple other podcasts before you came on here, and we were talking, one of the ones we cut was position versatility. And one, we were talking about it at the end of it, but like, it's not something that is going to be unique to what's going to happen at the Division I level with the roster crunch down to 34. I think it's going to play a lot. It's going to be played out a lot more because coaches are going to be looking for way more athletic kids that can do more on the field for them moving forward. And it's not something that we haven't done in the past, right? Like, I never really recruited a true first baseman when I was at RPI. Like, they generally came in as like a third baseman, but they couldn't really stick over there, and then you moved them to first. Now, if it's, they could flat out bang from the left side, like, and could handle it over there, sure. But, I think one of the things, like, especially towards the tail end of my career, and I don't think it's anything that's unique, but when you become a head coach, and this, like, decisions become a lot more heavy on you. Like, it's super easy when you're assistant to be like, yo, T.I.
No doubt.
we got to do this. Yeah. And like, when you're the one writing the lineup, it's like, you want to be sure about it. But, when you're recruiting, like, you want guys, because it gives you more options in game. Like, you're playing chess as a head coach, trying to figure out how to win games. And if I could move my backup second baseman into the game to pinch run for my first baseman and slide my third baseman or backup catcher over to first, and, you can start moving guys around it, because 50% of your games are going to be 1 or 2 run games. Like, they're tight at the end of the day. Like, and in order to do that, you have to be able to play defense. Like, I think, and Andy said this today, like, gone are going to be the days where you can just kind of take a guy or two that can flat out bang, because you got to be able to put a glove on. And I think that the point that I'm trying to make is like that the versatility and when you say like you recruit the middle of the field, we all do, like, but you're going to see it almost feel like it's exacerbated moving forward. Because you need guys that, like, you need 2 or 3 guys in your infield that can play 2 or 3 positions, because you don't have that luxury of having 2 third basemen, 2 shortstops, 2 second basemen, and 2 first basemen anymore. Like, not going to happen. You need guys that can do multiple things. And I think the athleticism that, you're looking for, and it's going to come out and seem like it's a lot more than it is, because, there's 6 roster spots that aren't going to be there anymore. And those fringe guys are now going to be playing Division II and then down to Division III. Like,
the trickle down effect's real.
But you know what I mean? Like, I think that it's not that it's interesting, but I think that it's worth kind of pulling that thread a little bit, because like, this is something that is not unique to what you guys have done down there, and you've had a lot of success doing it. So why change it? But you're going to see it a lot more across all of college baseball.
Agreed. The thing that I always say is, like, I remember 6 years ago, I was in an interview, and they you get the Wofford stigma. And I know not everybody knows it, but like, we have 150 steals every year and top 3 in stolen bases every year. And everybody's like, oh, you got 2 guys. I was like, no, everybody runs. So like, when everybody does 10 to 20 stolen bases, that's how you get a lot of stolen bases. Like, that's kind of how it works. And I was legit in an interview, and the guy goes, okay, like, but what if you see a first baseman that's going to, in just your words, Glass, like, he's going to bang, and like, he doesn't run well, but like, he's going to bang. And I remember in the middle of the interview going, but what if he doesn't? Right. And he goes, what? And I go, but what if he doesn't? And he goes, no, he's going to. And I go, but what if he doesn't? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, if he doesn't, You are now handcuffed because you have no move whatsoever with any move. Like that kid is now a backup first baseman that you can't put anywhere else.
Right.
I go, if we take the shortstop and you make, hey, he's a 6'3" lanky shortstop and we move him to first base, and I go, and he can't bang, I go, he could still play third, short, first, and probably can spell in the outfield for you and can still run. I go, so you can still pinch run him, you can still play defense with him, and probably has a little small ball in him. I go, so now I'm getting 3 things out of somebody who can't hit compared to the first baseman who is giving me 0 things. Maybe some defensive first, so we'll give him a half.
Right.
I go, that's the difference.
But the other thing too is that guy that can bang, generally speaking, and again, we're speaking in generalities here, like they're usually going to be short-sighted on the defensive end. Like
for sure.
You know, when you're, and this is, I think, a misnomer, especially at the youth level, like you kind of throw the biggest guy over there because he's the biggest target. Like you get to the college level, the first baseman handles the ball in the infield, aside from the pitcher and the catcher, the most. Like I want a guy over there who I trust enough to be able to handle the ball, to be able to throw, to be able to be athletic, like not some dude who just has cement shoes on that can't really move unless the ball's thrown chest high. And
right.
Because that's not the game we play. And I think
that's a lot of
something
touches
that you see, right? And like that's something that you're starting to see is a lot more guys, a lot more programs that are looking at it that way of being like, we can't just stick a guy over there who only bangs. Like we need somebody who can actually pick the ball. We need somebody who can move. There's a lot more that goes into it than just like, it's a left-handed bat who can bang. Like, but to your point, like, what if he doesn't? Now I have a guy who can't bang and is a below average defensive first baseman, and I need that guy to be above average to make sure, like, because it's a run prevention sport, we need to get outs. Like outs,
and now it's a roster limit thing too,
right?
The thing that always comes back to me with the athleticism portion of it is that there's 2 things to this, but the big thing is if you're athletic, if you can run, if you can play defense, you don't have to get hits to impact the game.
Exactly.
And that's such a big part of it because, like, you can, if you're a shortstop and you can really defend and you can take some quality at bats, like you can not be swinging the bat well, find yourself on first base, steal a base, score on a base hit, make a couple plays in the field, and you help me win games.
No doubt.
Billy Saleno said this. I thought this was really interesting, that position players make pitchers better. Pitchers never make position players better. So, like, that athleticism side, the ability to defend, cover ground, like, it's not just about making the routine play. And it's
no doubt
watching you guys play is that everybody covers ground. That ball that falls in between outfielders, it doesn't fall when everybody in the outfield runs 6'6".
Right.
Like, so you're picking up your pitchers, you're covering more ground, more plays are getting made, more balls are getting kept in the infield, double plays are getting kept in order. Like, that's the stuff that I don't think a lot of high school players and high school coaches and stuff really think about, is how much being able to move and be athletic impacts the college game.
Right.
Because it's so much faster that when you have dudes who can run and they're flexible and they're athletic, like, you just build a team that is more resilient. Like, it's harder to beat a team that catches the ball really well and they can score without having to get a ton of hits. Because, I mean, the way pitching's going these days, like, it seems like it's strikeout or home run. Like, that's a hard way to live. But if you can grind out at bats and you have guys who can make things happen on the base, they can go from first to third. You don't have to worry about dudes. With you guys, everybody who's on second base can score.
Right.
And that matters, because with some of the stuff that these guys are running out there, getting consecutive hits, getting 4 hits in an inning, it's hard to have a big inning if you don't have guys who can do the other stuff that's really, really valuable in a baseball game.
Yeah. We use the line all the time. Like, if we're going against a team and you look up and you're like, they're not that athletic, but they'll strike. Like, our line that we use is make them play baseball. Like, so you'll hear it out of our dugout. You're like, just make them play baseball, meaning put that thing in play with 2 strikes, hit it hard, run fast, like, get ready to take the extra base and make these guys play. I go, there's not much baseball happening when you're going to strike out 15 to 18 times in a game. There's not a lot of baseball happening along the way. So we use all the time. We're like, just make them play baseball. We'll be in a good spot. Like, make them play baseball. Like, make them field the bunt, throw it to the right base, stealing, good throw, good catch, good tag. Like, just make them do it over and over again. I promise you we'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of truth to it. And Andy says this all the time. Like, when we start talking about building rosters and you get to college and you do this stuff, but like, one of the harder things that younger kids have to kind of figure out and learn, and it's probably where you guys, I'm assuming, might see the steepest learning curve for them, is like, they have to learn to play within an offense. Yes. in high school, like, you might, like, generally speaking, everyone that we recruit at the college level is hitting between the 1 and 4 spot in college. Like, unless you're on a loaded high school team, like we're mostly recruiting top of the lineup hitters. But like, when you're top of the lineup, like, if you're the 4-hole guy, like, you might be the 4-hole guy on your high school team, like, you might be the 9-hole guy at Wofford. Like, that is a completely different off, like, how you function in that offense as the 9-hole guy versus the 4-hole guy is so different. And it's something that, like, the athleticism can kind of, mitigate some of those issues. And it makes it, I would imagine it makes it a little bit easier because I've seen it, but like, it helps because that 4-hole guy that you're recruiting out of high school, like, if he's not that athletic, like, that kid's probably going to have to sit in the middle of the lineup and try to bang. And now he's a clog on the base pass. Like, he's not scoring from second. You have a 6-hole guy behind him who can run, but he's going to get held up. So like, it creates more issues where if all of a sudden, like, hey man, I know you hit 4-hole for your high school. Like, you ain't got the juice to do it here. Like, you're going to hit in the 8-hole. And we're going to ask you to hit run. We're going to ask you to bunt. We're going to ask you to do a lot more things. And learning how to function within that offense is a steep learning curve. But the more athletic you are, the more, you can kind of cut down that steep learning curve to be able to get yourself a little bit more burn.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. A number of times we get a guy, I'm like, hey man, we're going to bunt. And they're like, Coach, I've never bunted in my life. And I was like, yeah, I could tell.
Yeah.
I can tell. That's terrible. That's not good. It's so bad.
Like, this is the thing that, like, and you see it on Twitter, like, don't bunt, blah, 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 blah. Like, there is always going to a time and place, depending on how you run your offense, but there's always a time and place where you're going to bunt. Like, when I first started RPI, like, Carl, like, we'd get first and second on, and Carl would be like, bunt. I'm like, it's the first inning, bro. Like, what are we doing here? And like, it worked. But like, you need that, like, you needed, especially at like our level, like, you needed your 3 or 4-hole guy to be able to bunt because, I mean, shit, man, if we get into the 9th inning and we get the first 2 guys on, like, I'm not letting you bang into a double play. Like, we're going to bunt and get guys to second and third, force them to probably walk our 5-hole guy, and then let's see where the chips fall. But if we don't, now you force the pressure, they, throw it away, you just won a game. On being able to do that. And there's so many ways, like, I used to tell my guys at the time, like, I don't care how we score more runs than the other team. I really don't. Like, we could get no hit and have 15 walks and win. I don't care. Like, we're in the business of wins and losses here. Like, I don't care how we do it. And to be that dynamic of an offense takes a lot, and it takes that athleticism to be able to do it. And the more pressure you put on people, it's funny, the more, no matter how good they are, generally, the more pressure you put on, eventually they're going to crack.
No doubt.
I watched. So Eric coaches against San Diego out on the West, and I think you guys have a lot of similarities in terms of how it's built. Like, everybody's athletic, everybody can run. But one of the things that stuck out to me when I was talking to Eric about him is he said they're super hard to play against because they're not one-dimensional. Like, they can beat you with a long ball if you don't make good pitches. But every inning, they make it really difficult for you to play defense and difficult to pitch because guys extend at bats. Everybody can run, so the bunt is always a threat. Everybody who's on first base is a threat to steal second. But when you start to stack that up, you put so much pressure on a defense. Every pitch becomes a really important pitch. All of a sudden, you got pitching coaches calling fastballs and counts they want to throw breaking balls because the dude over on first is a threat to steal, and now a guy's getting a better pitch to hit. And watch you guys against LSU in the regional. That's the thing that stuck out to me. Like, you're freaking hard to play against.
Yeah. I mean, the long story is, so we ran the triple option at Wofford forever, and we were a top 10, FCS team, and for the longest time running the triple option. And we started like talking in that mannerisms because I was like, if you're not ready for what we're trying to do, and you're not prepared for it from the first day of the fall and the first day of the spring going through it, I go, it's really hard to like pick up. Oh, hey, you got to be quicker to play. Coach, I pitch at a 1-5. Yeah, you can't be a 1-5 to Wofford. And you're just sitting there going like, okay, now I got to pitch to a 1-2. Well, now I'm not very comfortable. So kind of pick your poison. We like relentless, exhausting, like just sitting there going like, yeah, every inning, like they're just always ready to go, always ready to do anything. And we had a player that transferred, played 4 years. We don't have grad school. So we went to grad school somewhere else. And he goes, I go, I call him and, hey, like, what do I need to know? Like, what are you guys doing? And he goes, Jay, he's like, we're a good team and we're going to be really good. And they ended up going to a regional that year. He goes, we're one. If we're hitting, he goes, we will win. If we don't hit, we will lose. And he goes, where I felt like at Wofford, if we were hitting, we're going to win. If we're not hitting, we're going to find a way to win, because like we just have all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we have 3 hits. And you're like Glass was saying, I was like, yeah, we'll walk. We'll try to push bunt. We'll freaking safety with a guy on third. We'll sack. Like we'll win a game with 5 hits just because like we just have more plays in a humble way. Like we just have more options with all that athleticism. Not saying like, oh my God, we're going to do whatever we want to. I'm not like Lane Kiffin over here, but with the athleticism, you just feel like, oh, we're not hitting. You're like, okay, we're going to have to go small ball to depth. And you're like, okay, we're going to have to bang and we're going to win 15-14 a day. You're like, okay, let's do that too. Like whatever you want to do. I just feel like with the athleticism and how we go about it, you just have dimensions. You just have different avenues to go by, and you can just be diverse in what you're trying to, which we've, we recruit for, we vet for, we train for, the guys are coached for. So it's just all the way through, and they just can't hide from it when they get here. It's just every step of the way. Oh, you can't bunt? Well, you can't play. Like that's kind of how it goes.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever run into issues getting kids to buy into it? Because
great question.
Like the way everybody wants to play is like hit home run, hit doubles, because that's what's cool. And
right.
You guys play a little bit of a different style, and it's not like you take the ability of those guys to do it away. But in order to be like exactly what you're talking about,
oh yeah,
in order to be successful with you guys, you got to do certain things. Like, do kids ever fight it, or is the culture? I mean, you guys have been doing this, like you said, since 2015. Like, it's pretty established that you guys are really good. Does the culture take care of it, or do some kids?
I would say like it is well talked about through the recruiting process, and it is probably talked about more once they commit to Wofford. It's just like a nonstop cycle, and then the upperclassmen who've been here are just coaching it up and going with it, and they just can't hide from it. So like when they go in the locker room and they're like, man, why did I safety? Like I should be able to hit. Like the upperclassman jumps your stuff. And he's like, we do that because we want to win and we value winning. So like, I think it's a culture thing. I hope it's a culture thing more than anything else. But yeah, like the buy-in's phenomenal in our guys, but I think it goes, they know it's unique. They know it's a niche. Like they understand all that, and they go, but I think that's where the success comes from, because they buy in and they do everything that way. And I think it works its way through. And if they don't like it and they want to fight it, they're not really here that long to begin with, because like, they're like, well, this isn't my style. And you're like, totally get it, man. Like, you don't want to play this style. Like, don't need to be here. That's perfect. Like, it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for everybody. You need to go somewhere where you want to go. We support you, and we're going to keep going with guys who want to play this style.
On the pitching side of things, obviously you guys got some dudes with some really good stuff. But one of the things that stuck out to me is you don't have many dudes that all look the same. Slightly different slots.
We have a new guy that added, and when I was legit talking to him today about, in the office, I go, you know what they need? And I legit went like this with my arms. I go, they need a lot more of this. And he's like, what? I go, just a lot of more funk, like a lot of more of everything. So yeah, that's kind of our thing, is just, in Glass, you could probably say the same. Like when I just go through and I go, what did I not want to face? Like, what did I not want to face? Like, 88 to 92 over the top with a traditional slider. I was like, yeah, man, we shake a tree. We find that nowadays. I go, what do I want to face? Like, I didn't like facing this guy. I didn't like facing like the guy who throws almost on the other side of his head. Like, I didn't like those guys. So that's what we're trying to do, is just create as many different looks as you possibly can, different slots, different arm angles, different arm actions, and then when you feel like you figure that guy out, boom, he's out of there, and it's the next guy coming in. So we recruit very, very big into that of, subbies and sidearm guys and 3/4 slots. And, and it started when Todd was here. We were just like, well, we're not going to go get the best dudes that are 6'4", 88 to 92 with 3 pitches. I go, we're not landing that guy. So I go, so what do you got to do? Like, what's the best guy we can get? And we go, well, we can get all the niche guys. We can get the island of misfit toys that, nobody values as much as us. So I go, we'll go get those guys.
I had a feeling that was by design, but I figured I would at least ask. It's
funny you asked. I was legit. I was like, we need more of this.
You see different slots, and if you see different slots and you see different sides of the plate as a hitter, you can't really settle into a pattern. You can't really settle into a slot. Like, your eyes are changing. The pitch mix is going to be different, and it makes it hard to hit. And like, I think there's a ton of advantage to that. And then you're seeing a lot of other schools kind of going to something similar where they're looking for guys who do unique things and like an outlier pitch. Like, do you have a pitch that you can really leverage?
Right.
The slots, the sizes and the shapes stuck out to me watching you guys play. I was like, I like that. Because it's a creative way to think about how are you going to get a team together and win. And then you stack onto the fact that they all had really good stuff. And now it's coming from different angles, different slots, different pitches. And I mean, it's just a really tough thing to handle as an offense.
Yeah. If you go watch, the team that does it best at like the highest level is, if you ever go watch Clemson, like they're always on TV around here, and you go watch and you look up and it's just like one guy comes in and he's here and he's 94, 96, and the next guy comes in and he's here and they got a left, and you're just like, how do you go through a scouting report, he's out of the game, and the next one comes in, you're like, he is nothing like that. Scrap everything we just game planned for and try to figure this one out. And then he's out of the game. So I just think, especially as you guys know, being at academic schools throughout your guys' career, like, you're just not getting the guy that everybody dreams of like the PG top 200 kid. You have to get creative. You have to find something. You have to find your niche. And that's kind of how we did ours, is just, hey, Funk, creative. Like, what's your trick? Oh, your trick's a little bit different. Let's go with that.
Well, it's uncomfortable that staying in the box too. Like, that's not even just the different looks. Like, you legitimately can't get comfortable at bat to at bat, and that just like, that's going to frustrate people, because like your first at bat might be like, all right, I can figure this out in the second one, and then all of a sudden, like, whether it's a new guy or you get a different look, and it's like, well, thought I had this one figured out, and now I don't. And it just gets super uncomfortable, and then it's going to frustrate people, which does the same thing. Like, I love it. I think it's amazing. Andy brought that up the other day. I was like, you hit that one on the podcast.
Yeah. And it's Andy's all over this, man. His scouting report on us is elite.
I bear down.
Yeah, no, I don't know who sent you ours from another team, or you're just digging in True Media and Synergy, but you're all over us, dude.
Well, when you got friends that are friends, and like, I know you're real close with Grasset, and like, you roll with what you trust, and like, it's like, oh, Wofford's on. Like, I'm watching Wofford. Let's see what you do.
No doubt.
I just love the way you guys play, because it's so energetic, and like, the kids play super hard, and I value that probably more than anything.
I appreciate that.
Like,
that means the most. That means the most out of anything. I was legit writing our defensive indie for the first week, so we did every Monday. We send out like the game plan. Hey, this is what you need to work on. Andy, this is what you need to work on. Keith, this is what you need to work on. And we continue to coach you, but you always just have something in writing. From a hitting side, from a defensive side, you just have something in writing. And I was doing fall week 0, and I was doing it today, and everybody says the same thing. It says, talk to your big brother. So we do like a big brother, little brother program, so they know all of our verbiage and everything. And if the little brother messes up, the big brother runs. I go, because it's a big brother's job to teach the little brother. And then 2 is, you think you play tough, you're going to need to play tougher than that. Like, that was line 2, was, you think you play tough, you need to play tougher than that.
The play hard stuff is, maybe it's because I wasn't a great player that you just lean on like playing hard. But I just think that when you get a group of kids who play hard, like, they're going to come out on top more often than they should, just because they're going to run a hard 90. They're going to stretch it to a double. And when you get a culture like you guys got rolling, it just makes it fun because everybody's on the same page and like trying hard is cool. And like
Right.
being a tough ass who plays hard and dives after balls and competes his ass off, like that becomes the standard. And I don't know. I think that's what makes college fun.
I mean, I think Glass was saying is like, yeah, 50% of your games are going to be 1 to 2 run games, right? Like, didn't you say that? I go, don't you? I go, what team's going to come out on top in those 1 and 2s? The guys who freaking play hard all the time. Like, I go, they'll get the pops, they'll get the extra base, they'll dirt ball read, like they'll do all of that to get going and find a way. Like, so I think this college baseball, as you guys know, I go, it's ugly at points. I go, we think everybody envisions this like, oh, the game's so pretty and it's clean and like, oh, that's so nice. And I go, no, we feel 965 in college. I go, we feel 965, not 995. I go, it gets ugly. I go, so if like we're the tougher team, like we'll come out on more times than not because, it gets ugly. It gets ugly out there. Like midweek baseball gets real ugly. Like we'll be 12-10 with 15 walks and 7 errors between two teams. And you know what? Somebody's getting a win and somebody's getting a loss. And, we can still have 5 errors and 10 walks and still find a way to win. And I'm cool with that. I go, I don't love it, but I'm cool with it.
Yeah, but it's so true. Like, I'd said this before, I don't, a couple times, but like, not that we were ever bad when I was the assistant at RPI. Like, we went to regional, we were good. But like, when I became that coach, I knew that we had kind of turned the corner from like a culture standpoint. Like, one of my rules in practice was when we inter-squatted, whether it was in-game, coach pitch, whatever, like if we're scrimmaging in some semblance, like if you hit the ball in the air, you have to touch second base.
Yeah.
It's just my rule. And I stole it from Coach Beretti. So I was like, if Coach Beretti's doing this, like it's got to work, right? So
yeah, the guy wins a lot of games, bro.
And after the first year of doing it, like one of our like freshmen didn't do it, and he got jumped by a handful of our older guys. And I was like, okay, like now I don't have to police this. Like now I can move on to, and like when you start having, and I love the big brother, little brother idea because like when really, really good teams and teams that have a lot of success are generally going to be player driven because now like a lot of those little things that you would have to police if the older guys can't, like are sucking the energy out of practice and then you're not able to actually go coach and do stuff. Like if you don't have to worry about, hey guys, you hit the ball in the air, you touch second base. Like if I have to continually remind you, like now it's taking time away from me doing other stuff. Now you have the older guys policing it. Now it's like, all right, I don't have to worry about that anymore because these guys are going to be on top of that. I can go do other stuff. And I just always thought that like COVID happened and a lot of other things happened. Like, I mean, my shortstop, my last year in 22, he played the whole season with a broken arm. Like they thought he broke like there's like a little thing in your shoulder. He dove and broke it. They thought he had like a torn labrum. Like MRI, everything, couldn't figure it out. They figured it out going into the conference tournament that he broke his arm.
Too late. Probably grew back.
Just ran out but I ran him out at shortstop every game. And I was like, what, like, so you get the end, I'm like, but this is why, like, we're in this position. Like, we have a bunch of tough dudes who just like he was a hockey kid. He's a Long Island kid, like, didn't care. It was just like, bro, I don't care what I have to do. Like, I'm rolling out there and I will be better than any other kid that you think you could put at shortstop. And I was like, okay, done and done.
You're my guy.
And, and we had a conversation because I lifted him in a game. He was like, I mean, he couldn't really swing the bat towards the back half of the year. And I lifted him in a close game and he was like, why'd you take me out of the game? And I was like, bro, you're like 0 for your last 10 right now. Like, I see birds landing on your barrel as it's coming through the zone. Like, we needed a hit in that spot. And like, it worked out. We won the game. He's like, I mean, I'm happy we won, but like, I feel like I've earned that. I was like, you've earned a lot more than you think. But like, in that spot, I couldn't leave
fair.
you.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it was. Like, you're going to start at shortstop tomorrow. Don't worry about it. But like, when you have kids like that and you have that culture, like, like when you, like, it starts to feel really special that like, you have a bunch of tough kids, like you figure out ways to win. Whereas like, when you don't have that, like you just collapse like a cheap tent when things get tough. And I think that, and when I left, like, Coach Falcon took over and they've had really good runs over the last 2 years since I left. And I'm super happy and proud of where like all those kids and what they've done. But, I just, my last couple of years, like, that's where I was like, damn, I wish that COVID didn't happen and we were able to kind of do a couple of other things in there. Cause I think we would have been, they'd be even further along than they are right now, which would be awesome. But I think that's awesome. I love that big brother Little brother.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as they start, like, you just feel like you look up and it's 5 coaches and actually 7 coaches because all your seniors are saying the right thing.
What do you do to vet that toughness, that compete? Like, is it just watching guys? Is it conversations? Like, how do you gather that information? Because, like, we all know there's a ton of really good athletes out there.
Right.
What do you do during the process to try to narrow down on the right type of kid?
I'm going to give you some, like, the obvious ones. Okay. We're going to watch you play. I'm going to watch you how hard you play. I'm going to call your coach. I'm going to call your high school coach. I'm going to call your travel coach. If we know anybody that's a kid that we're recruiting or on our team, which is, I feel like, a lot nowadays, we're going to ask them. And Andy, the number one thing that I will tell you that works the most on vetting them is I will square them up in a phone conversation and ask them how tough they are. And then the whole reason I do that is I go, because they're all going to say, Coach, I'm an 8 out of it. Like, I've heard a kid say a 6 one time, and I'm like, okay, like, thank you for being honest. This will be our last phone call. But most of the time it's 9 or 10. And the whole reason I get there is because, like, I want them to understand that is a really big priority for us. And I'm going to hold them accountable to that answer. And when they get to campus, I'll even, like, we'll do early on meetings, and one of the questions they'll ask in the survey is like, how hard do you play? And when they're all going to say a 9 or 10, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold you to a 9 or 10. And if I don't see a 9 or 10, like, I'm just holding you to what you said you played and go from there. But I started doing that like 3 years ago. And I think just the, how it is. After you get 10 years into it, you're like, man, I'm just sick and tired of the fluff. Like, I'm going to shoot straight to questions and go on with it. I don't have time for 30-minute conversations anymore. Like, this is going to be a 5-minute conversation. We're going to get the same stuff out. And I just started being like, hey, I got a question. What do you got? And they're like, Andy, how tough are you? He's like, I'm tough. 1 out of 10. How tough are you? He's like, I'm a 10. And you go, okay, man, if you come to Wofford, I'm going to hold you accountable to that. Okay, coach, sounds good. Boom. Like, that's where I'm going to. And of course, they're always the same thing, but I think it just starts to get the inception, so to speak, going of like, oh God, like, if this guy's asking that as question 2, like, this is a thing. Like, this is a really big thing for them.
I love that. What do you got a lot of multi-sport guys, or, like, do you hold any weight in, like, does it tip the scales if a kid's a football guy or he plays basketball? Like, is that something?
I do love that. I think that is where we're from, is more times than not, you'll get a couple multi-sport guys. Down here, you'll get a football, baseball guy, rare basketball, baseball guy. But as we go farther north, that's when you're going to get, like, your multiple sport guys. Down here, they become very specific very early. So you'll get a football, baseball. That's pretty much the common one. But God, I love a good hockey guy. Like, they're the toughest ones out there. God, it's not even close.
They can all hit. They got that.
Oh my God, they're we just recruited one out of Syracuse, and he's like, yeah, I had to pick between hockey and baseball in 9th grade. And I'm like, you're my guy. Like, you're it. Like, that's all you need to say. I go, that's all you need to say. You're tough. Like, you're always 2 minutes away from getting your butt kicked out there. You're tough as can be, dude.
Wrestling was it for me.
You would be that. You would be that.
So when kids are like, I wrestled.
I figured as much.
Kids are like, yeah, I wrestle. Like, there's a lot of discipline and toughness.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
that's what. And the thing
there's a lot of account of, like, you get beat, bro. Like, you can't blame anyone else.
Yeah,
there's a lot of accountability in it.
I agree. Like, we do love the 2-sport guys. We do, and you also think, like, the ego in us always thinks we can get the most out of guys. So when they play another sport, you're like, oh, they're not even freaking maxed out yet. Like, they got more. And that's, I remember, up by you, Glass, you remember Brett Rodriguez from Queens? Yeah. Brett Rodriguez, one of my favorite players of all time. We did a study when he was here. We had another kid from Atlanta. Brett was a 3-sport athlete, football, basketball, baseball, got offered by all of those sports to go play college. Ended up coming to Wofford to play baseball, played 3 years with the Mariners, and now is in the Puerto Rican Winter League all the time. He's like the rookie there. Phenomenal freak athlete. And we would always talk about how many more reps the kid from Atlanta had by the time they were freshmen in college than Brett Rodriguez had by the time he got here. Because you sit there and I was like, what'd you guys play at Queensbury? And he's like, 21 games. How many did you play, in summer? He's like, 20 games. And I go, yeah, that's a high school season in Atlanta. And then they play another 50, and then they play another 30 in the fall. I go, that kid's walking to college with probably 1,000 more at bats than you are at the same age. Mm-hmm. So you sit there and you go, oh, you can dream on Brett more because he's 1,000 at bats behind everybody else. Wait until he focuses on one sport. Where does he take off to? And most times, like that's the thing. Like they just make these freaky jumps because they're sitting there going like, and we're Northern guys, we get it. Like in the winter, you're like, where are you going? You're like, going to the batting cage. You're like, what are you like? That's all you can do. You just hit. Like there's no reps of ground balls and there's no long toss throwing and all that stuff. I was like, so those guys get here and their ceilings are just so high because they're just so many reps behind.
The practice.
I think the other thing too,
like you see kids make big jumps in college because they actually practice. And I think it's one of the big gaps in the youth baseball system right now is I think they play too many games. I don't think they practice enough. There's not enough opportunity for like a safe space to fail. And I think in college you get that. And that's where I noticed a lot of guys they'd make huge jumps in their first 6 months on campus because they're practicing a ton. And they're in a space where they can mess up a first to third and you can coach them on it. But a lot of times in youth baseball, it's just they roll the balls out, they play their games, and you don't get a chance to really push the envelope without any like significant consequences. And kind of to your point, when you get a really good athlete like Rodriguez, and then you inject him into a system where you practice a lot, that kid can just take off.
He's not. My college coach said this, and I think he was doing like a lesson with a young kid on the side, and he goes, yeah, he's like, you want to get good at golf? He's like, play golf once a week, go to the range 6 days. And he's like, that's when you get really good. He's like, you take all the stuff you learn from, you go to the range and you start playing there. I go, you'll start taking off. And I go, yeah, we all want to, we really want to get golf. I go, we just go play all the time and not as much as we want to. But I go, but what if we went to the range 5-6 days a week? We just freaking take off and start having more shots and everything else. But we just want to run right to 18 holes and play. And I go, it's the same thing.
100%.
No, it is. And the hard part in our game too is that you're not, especially, this as being a Northeast guy, like to your point, we can only do stuff in the winter in the cages, and this game is not played in a cage. It's not played in a vacuum of like, hey, let's go take some fungos. Like there's more athleticism that like has to happen within the play itself in every single play that goes on in a baseball standpoint. I think that like we've, in some instances, and we don't have to go down this road. Like I think Andy's talked about this and I too, like we've gotten a little bit too drill heavy in some scenarios where like we're taking athleticism out of what it is that we're trying to do. And, I tried to inter squad as much as I possibly could because that's where you can screw up. And I'd rather screw up at full speed and figure it and coach it up that way than bang 8,000 balls off the wall and run double cuts and keep yelling at people for not throwing to the right base because we can't get that concept. Like, yeah, there's a time and a place for it, but like, I'm just tired of banging fungos from behind second base and having people run and throw balls. Like, and then the outfielders don't want to, like, the outfielders are trying to screw everyone up. Like, that was my favorite part of first and thirds. You knew you lost it. Like, the outfielders are just doing anything they possibly can to screw up. And it's like, okay, on to the next.
You mean Booth backpedaling down third base so that he could try to score? Our outfielders
off his back once.
We do the first and third stuff, and our outfielders used to do the dumbest shit, where they would backpedal down the third baseline so it looked like they were heading back, so their body was facing the other way.
Yeah.
We had some clowns. Clowns.
The Red Fox days, baby.
Those were the days.
Those are the days, boys.
What obviously data is a big piece of the puzzle now.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys leverage that in the recruiting process? Is it something you lean on, or is it just kind of another piece of the puzzle for you?
Oh, God bless. That's a good one. I you know what? We use it when we got it. I don't think I'm like over the moon searching for it and need to see it. I think that's the pitching guys love that stuff way more than the hitters, like way more than the hitter side. And I have the hitting background, so like if you brought our pitching coach, he'd probably like, yeah, I want all of it. I want to see all of it. I want to see, the outlier pits and the vert on it and the spin rate, like all of it. I go, and the hitter in me, I'm like, no, like I want to know how, what it looks like with 2 strikes and, do you slow down on a breaking ball, like all that stuff. So I think it's just depending on the side. I do not overly rely on an Andy at all. I think that's more the pitching side of things. But again, if you're going to throw us information, I'm going to look. I'm going to look at it. But it's not the kids were like, hey, here's my Rapsoda sheet and here's my TrackMan and my bullpen. I'm going to be honest, I don't give a crap. Like I don't give a crap until a batter gets in there and shows me, what it looks like. What's your fastball velocity when it's 3-0 with a batter in there? Like that's what I care about. And I think COVID all tricked us. We all signed 93 mile an hour guys, and they get to campus and they're actually 86 mile an hour guys because it's just no competitiveness in there, and they're just throwing it. And if it hits the 9 box, it hits the 9 box, and if it doesn't hit the 9 box, it doesn't hit the 9 box, and there's no repercussions or being down 3-0. So I think that's my biggest thing with those guys is like I want the information, but I want the information in game and stuff that I can use as tangible information, not a bullpen. We had a kid sent on our team, sent one and goes, Coach, 93 today. And I go, no battery? He's like, yeah. And I was like, don't count. Like, don't count. And my other thing I'll say is like 93. I go, was it a strike? And he's like, I was a little high in the arm side. I go, nope, doesn't count. It doesn't count. That doesn't count.
Yeah, I think Keith, you've mentioned this a bunch, and like, the data matters, but it only matters if the data shows up in the game.
Right.
Like you can have a
Great
100
point.
mile an hour exit velocity in batting practice in a controlled environment where the ball is going to be middle every time. But can you do that with any level of consistency when somebody's trying to get you out? What's your pitch recognition like? Do you swing it a ton? Can you get to velocity? And I think that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes during the recruiting process, not necessarily for coaches, but I think it gets lost on players and parents that they use the data to compare themselves to other players.
Exactly.
Well, I throw that harder, I run that fast, but what is the actual output in the game? And how does that translate to what you do from a physical perspective? Because if you run 6-7, but you can't go first to third on a ball that bounces twice and gets through the infield to the right fielder, well, there's a gap there. There's something missing. Like you can run in a straight line, but when I need you to have a little bit of instincts, a little bit of feel for the game and actually play at that speed, or I'm 100 mile an hour exit velocity, but I swing and miss at 85 mile an hour fastballs because I can't figure out timing. Like that gets lost a lot of times. And I think you've hit on it a bunch that like, I like everything, but I need it to show up on game day.
Exactly. I mean, how many times have we all recruited, Coach, this guy's a 6'6" guy. Well, he can't steal second base. What does it matter? He's a 6'6" guy. And we've all recruited. He's like, he's a 7-0. And you're like, yeah, and he can I would trust that guy to steal it anytime he wants to. I go, because you have that reactionary skills and that game feel. And I go, there's a lot of guys who are showcase warriors that's exactly what they are. And parents are like, well, like, look at this. This is great. I go, and we would rather have that than not have that with some baseball savviness.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you seen a kid who, you get your head first or your show ball or your best in the U.S., whatever metrics when you're at the workout, and it's like, damn, this kid ran a 6.7. And then you watch him take ground balls and you're like, he doesn't get off the ball at all. Like, he can't go first at third. And then you see the kid who ran a 7 and you're like, that kid plays a lot faster than
no doubt
7-0. Like that kid he gets off the ball. Like that, like this kid gets around baseballs that 7-0 runner shouldn't get around. That kid went first at third. He went second to home. Like that kid plays faster. And we've talked about this. Like, I think that kid gets overlooked a little bit more than the past with some of the metric stuff. And I think you're right. COVID tricked a lot of us into some of that stuff, but like, you have to be able to see the gameplay portion of it in order to make the decision. Like, I used to get those emails all the time. We still do. Like, oh, it's a 95 exit velo. And like, I never cared about, like, I'll be honest with you, at head first, like, I never cared when I'd watch kids wind up like they're a top and try to swing as hard as they can to hit that ball.
No doubt.
I've seen
like,
that every showcase I've ever been, and then it pops up and it's like 94. I'm like, that kid literally spun himself around like an owl's head and just swung as hard as he possibly could. Like, that swing does not play in a game.
No
and
doubt.
then you watch him hit, and it's like, that kid can't hit. Like, there's no adjustability in that swing. There's no timing. Like, there's nothing there. And the kid who's like an 85, and I'm just throwing numbers out, like, that kid's on the barrel every time. He's hitting line drives back through the middle of the field. Like, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I'd rather have that kid who's an 85 and on the barrel all the time than the kid who's a 95 and swung like an owl's head and just caught the right number.
Right.
And I think sometimes like people think the numbers are, because from a pitching standpoint, like numbers are kind of a barrier to entry. Like if you email, like when I was at RPI, if you emailed me and said like, hey, I'm 74 to 76, like I'm probably not recruiting you. Like I'm not recruiting you. Every single arm that we had when I left from a right-handed pitching standpoint was 85 and above. So like, if you're 74, I ain't recruiting you. But people think that the barrier to entry from a hitting standpoint, like, well, I have a 95 exit velo and I run a 6.7. I'm a college player. Like, no, man, that's not at all what it is. There's so much more that goes into this.
Right.
From a hitter's standpoint, a position play, you have to play defense. You got to run. You got to run the bases. You got to take the right angles. You got to throw from multiple slots. There's so much more that happens. And oh, by the way, we haven't even gotten into hitting yet. Like, you got to be able to bunt. You got to be able to hit. You got to be able to be on the barrel. Like, the vast majority of guys aren't going to college and hitting 10, 15, 25 bolts. Like, most of the guys are, you might run into a couple, but you're going to be a singles, doubles guy. Like, so there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think some people think that because you hit certain metrics from a position player standpoint, like, I'm recruitable. Like, no, man, it's got to show up in game. Has to.
No doubt.
When the lights are on, got to show up.
When you're looking at a hitter, what are some of the things that you're kind of dialed in on?
Pitch selection. Like, I think the running joke, and it's funny because like the guys will go through and they'll be like, yeah, I just went to saw Keith Glasser play and he walked 3 times. And they're like, JJ's fired up over there. I go, yeah, I love it. And like people are like, well, I want to see him hit. I go, and I do too. Like, I get it. I go, but if you walk all the time, God, I love you, man. I love you. Like, and that goes back to, we talked before. You're sitting there going like, the shortstop can run. Like, just get on base. I don't care. Like, I don't care how you get to first base. You want to get hit in the head, or you want to lay down a bunt or hit a ball off the wall. I go, it's all the same to me. I go, it is all the same to me. You finding a way to get to first base any way you want to do it. I'm cool with it. I make the running joke all the time as I sit in the dugout. I go, when somebody swings at a third strike that they know is getting past the catcher, like, that guy's full rided. Like, that's a full ride guy. Like, that's my guy. I go, you need to find a way to get to first base. Like, that is our objective. Like, if you pulled every single one of our hitters and you go, okay, what do you got? Like, what's the Wofford thing? Like, find a way to get on base. Like, I don't care how. I get hit. I don't care. So like, that is something I really value, and I take into recruiting. Can you make good pitch decisions? Can you swing at good ones? Like, is your timing? What is it? How much do you hate striking out? How much willingness, when you get to 2 strikes, are you willing to put that thing in play? But as you kind of think, and as we go through this podcast, like, you can kind of start seeing how everything kind of like flows into each other. Oh, they really run the bases, which means they really value getting on base. So like, they all just kind of work their way to each other and snowball through it. But yeah, those are the big things that I really care about as you go through it. Can you use the whole field? I don't know if anything irks me more than when I show up and it's like, 0-2, pull in the third base dugout, pulled in the third base dugout, pulled in the third base. I'm like, yeah, good luck hitting 1/7 of the field and being a good player for us. It's not going to happen. Like, it's not a thing. So using the whole field, pitch selection, and finding a way to first base, that's what I value.
How badly
steal first base either.
I mean, if you try to go at this drop third strike, go for it, dude. Like, I'm all about it. That's stealing it.
The 2 strike thing, I don't think gets enough talk, because kids watch big league baseball and they're watching a lot more college baseball, but kids watch big league baseball and there's a lot of binary results, like double, home run, or strikeout.
Right.
And that level, when you field, going back to some numbers you threw out, when teams field 995, getting the ball in play doesn't matter as much.
Agreed.
When teams field 965, a ball in play could be the difference between a win and a loss.
No doubt.
And kids who hate to strike out and are willing to make some concessions when you get to 2 strikes, that's how you have an offense, not just a collection of hitters. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I do think that most college coaches will tell you that strikeouts kill you. Because every time a ball's put in play, it's a chance to get on base. Like,
of course. I mean,
when you see a guy like Tommy White at LSU who can hit the ball a freaking mile, was a first rounder. When you see him spread out, go no stride and choke up, where's the ego on the 16-year-old who's willing to swing over top of a slider 4 times in a game because he's trying to hit a nuke? Like,
no doubt.
And it's harder to learn that when you get to college because the failure comes really quick if you can't make the adjustment. And then eventually you just don't get a lot of chances to prove that you've gotten better. And
right.
I think a lot of high school kids would benefit from just hating to strike out. And it shows up. Like you've watched enough games. We've all watched enough games. You can tell when a kid gets to 2 strikes and he's like, I am not. Like, there's no way you're getting me out.
No chance, right?
And those kids, they end up being really good offensive players, not just hitters, because they understand that ball in play, fouling off 2 pitches, going from 1-2 to 3-2, like that might get you to a reliever that they don't want to throw on a Friday. And all of a sudden your Sunday got easier to win because now they've exhausted a bullpen dude on a Friday and they can't throw him on Sunday. And like that trickle down effect of how extending an inning, getting a guy out of the stretch. Like you get a dude who's stuffing it on you. Sometimes the only thing you need to do is figure out how to get on first base and get him out of the freaking windup.
Yeah.
You change a whole game. And some of that just comes down to just being a stubborn kid who wants to compete his butt off and figure out a way to just get the ball and play.
Yeah. We do a hitters meeting every year, and our numbers are skewed because we run well. But I looked up and I said, we do a stat called 2-strike wins, which just means pretty much if you put the ball in play or like you win a full count 3-2, that's 2-strike win. So we did a stat. If you have a 2-strike win, which would just be at a yes or a no, you are getting on base in Wofford College at a 40% clip because I think teams field against us like 940 because we run so well. Like the threat, the fear of, oh my God, like I got to get rid of this. Like they're running down the line. So I tell our guys, I go, if you just win your 2-strike at bat, you have a 40% chance of getting to first base, just winning it. I go, you put that thing in play, you walk, like those are 2-strike wins, 40% chance of getting to first base. And then it ties in another stat, and you start giving those, and the analytical smart kids that we all coached, they sit there and they're like, oh, geez, coach, that's it? I go, yeah. I go, you strike out. That is a 0% chance of getting on base, I'll tell you right now. Unless you chase the one away, the kicks away, that I'm still waiting on. But I go, and then we just continue to work off of that. And I use the term hate it all the time. Like I go, you need to hate that thing. And I was talking to our new assistant whose brother is just in pro ball. He goes, my brother needs to hate it a little bit more. And I go, you need to hate it when you get to 2 strikes, not before. Like I go, and that's a big thing. Like our freshmen come in and they go, JJ hates striking out. Like you need to put that in thing. And I always correct them. I go, no. I hate striking out when you're with 2 strikes. That's when I hate striking out. Don't go up there 1-0, hit a ground ball to second base that gets 17 hops to the second baseman. You're like, yeah, coach, I didn't strike out. And you're like, yeah, that didn't help me. I go, hate striking out when you get to 2 strikes. That's what I want you to do. I go, don't do it with no strikes. Don't do it with 1 strike. Just do it with 2 strikes. I go, hate it with 2 strikes. Don't hate it before then.
Oh, that's such a great thing because it's not about not striking out. It's about being tough when you're in a 2-strike count. And there's a big difference.
Big. We've coached the guys. You're like, coach, I didn't. And you're like, I'm putting in play. And you're like, yeah. 0-0 backside ground ball at 72 X's below doesn't help us. Trust me, it doesn't help us.
Do you find when you're able to draw the line between those statistics that it kind of lays the foundation for the culture and the kids start to understand, oh, this is why this stuff is really important?
Yes. I think like the analytical side is so good. I mean, and we've all, like I said, like we've all had pretty high academic institutions, and the guys we're getting, they think that way. Like they think that way. So you need to kind of scratch that itch and give them information. Now, when we go out to the cage, instead of me just saying like, you need to hate striking out. And they're like, yep, gotcha. But if you go, you need to hate striking out, here's 15 reasons. Here they all are. They'll sit there and go, oh, okay, gotcha. Like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. This is why you hate 400% on base percentage. If you hate striking out, they're like, God, like that's pretty good. I go, do you want? And the one I use all the time that they love is I go, if we're up 10, down 10, I always say these at bats mean the most. I go, you want to have good numbers? These at bats mean the most. Up 10, down 10. And like, of course, they don't really mean the most, but it's the idea of like, that's when your mind and your focus goes away. So this year we were beating up somebody in a midweek, and our starting shortstop comes up. I think we were up by 20. I think we were legit up by 20. And he had like this locked in 2-strike, 9-pitch at bat, fouls one off, fillets one, check swing, and then finally hits a line drive over the left fielder's head or the shortstop's head. And I go, yep, that is 5 points on his batting average at the end of the year. So instead of him hitting 295, he is now going to hit 300, and that at bat did it for you. I go, and nobody even thinks anything of it. Like, if you dump that at bat, nobody would even care. I go, never like, we're up 20, coach. Like, we're good. I go, but that one means the most. And you kind of build off of that and keep going. But I also think that's kind of why we won so, like, if you look at our record, we won some games. You're like, did you really score 27 runs three or more, like 27 or more? I think we did it 3 or 4 times this year. And it was kind of that mindset of like, hey, like, these ones mean the most. Like, these mean the most. Keep going. Like, don't let anybody tell you these at bats don't mean anything, and you're supposed to dump them because we're down up 20. I go, that's not a thing. Like, you need to do these for yourself and your numbers. Like let's lock in. So,
but it's an important part because we all know this, having coached this game for so long. Like, and I used to talk about this with my guys all the time. Like, you never know over the course of a game what's going. Like, when you're 50% of your games are 1 or 2 run games, like, you never know what play or at bat is going to win or lose you that game.
Exactly.
Like that at bat you dumped in the 3rd inning with runners on 2nd and 3rd and had a completely non-competitive at bat where we don't score a run. Like, that could be the at bat. Now, whether it is or not, like, you're never going to know. But you could look to that and be like, man, if we didn't put together a non-competitive at bat right there and put a ball in play, we score 1 run. Instead, we punch out on 3 really bad swings and then fly out. We get no runs out of that inning and we lose by 1. Like,
right.
And
it's butterfly effect.
But having that mindset, up 10, down 10, like, that carries over when you're in those tight games. It's like, hey man, like, we don't give things away when we're up big, down big. Like, we ain't giving things away when it's a 1-run tight game. Like, we're still playing the game, the brand of baseball that we play. And like, that carries over to the success that you have. And I think that, like, that's probably one of the hardest things, which I give you and TI a ton of credit for creating that culture. Like, it's probably one of the tougher things to get a lot of kids to be able to do, because you do lose focus in those games because you're moving guys in and out, and hey, this might not mean that much, but like, it does, especially when you're a younger kid coming off the bench in those games. Like, you might not think that it means anything, but as a coaching staff, we're evaluating what it is that you're doing in that spot, which then could lead to more opportunities down the road. Or if you go in and just, completely put together a non-competitive at bat, the back of your mind, you're like, he's not ready. Like, there's still some things we got to be able to work on with him from an approach standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, all this stuff for him to really be able to be ready to really get out there and compete for us, versus you go and don't give anything away. It's like, all right, like, there might be something there. He might be a little bit further along than I thought. And like, that plays so much more as a coach, because you're like it or not, for everyone who listens to this, like, we're constantly evaluating, especially at the college level. Like, we get paid in wins and losses. We can lose our jobs if we're not good. So like, we're constantly evaluating to make sure that we have the best 9 that we could throw out there every day. And if you're a dude who ends up being a defensive guy in the back end of games, like, that could lead to a midweek start. And then next thing you know, a dude tweaks a hammy and you're playing 5 games in a row. And next thing you know, you're, now all of a sudden, like, you're looking up and you're like, damn, this kid's hitting like 520 since he's gotten in. Like, it's going to be a little bit of a hard conversation to have with some guys when they get healthy. Like, we have more options now. And it's great as a coach, but, now as a player, like, it pushes you to be better. Now it pushes that guy in front of you, like, yo, I have to be better too. Like, this isn't going to be a cakewalk. And all of a sudden, like, that bar is raised just off of not giving away at bats when you're up big, down big. And same thing on the mound, I'm assuming.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah, but as you guys deal with it all the time, like, it's something we need to tell the freshmen. Like, hey, this is going to be the first time you don't play in a long time.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be the first time you don't play in a long time. But when you walk into that game, I use the line building credit. Like, hey man, you know what a good credit score is? How do you build your credit? When you get that at bat, when we're up 10 in the 8th inning against a midweek game, like, are you going to dump it? And I'm not saying you have to get a hit. But like, are you locked in? Are you ready to go? Are you going to have a good at bat? Like, that's how you build credit. That's how you get your credit score from a 400 to a 450 to a 500. And then you start getting in the bigger ranges, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, now let's admit, like exactly what you said. Build that credit, man. Whatever it is, whatever I'm asking. You want a pinch run? Go build your credit. Live at bats, build some credit. I go, freshman, you just don't walk in and be like, 800 credit score, guys. I can get anything I want. I go, doesn't work like that. You need to build your credit. And I think that's just a freshman walk in a lot of the time going, I've not used to not playing. Like, I don't know what to do. Build your credit. Like, that's what you need to do. Build credit.
That practice portion. Like, that's why it gets lost a lot of times. You know, we've all had the meetings with kids at the end of the fall, and it's, you know, I feel like I'm not really getting a chance, or like after a spring season where they didn't get a lot of at bats. It's like, well, hey man, I watched you 6 days a week for the last 10 months. Like, you've had a lot of chances, and we've had this conversation before. And the guys who practice well, the guys who do pregame really well, the guys who are prepared in the dugout, they don't give away those at bats. Right. They don't give away the opportunity when they get that midweek start or somebody goes down, they're prepared for it. And it's not a coincidence that the kids who figure out how to work and figure out how to practice and make sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain, it usually works out for those kids. Almost always works out for those kids because they're willing to do the process related stuff, which you don't give away a BP round. Like, you might not be a starter on a game day, but what do your reps in the outfield look like during BP? The guys who take those reps serious, it's funny how they end up usually finding a way to help you win games at some point. Maybe not as a freshman, but maybe they do that for a full year. And as a sophomore, now I'm prepared to do this. And I think that gets lost, and maybe not lost, but I think there's a instant gratification thing with a lot of kids because they've always been good, that they just assume when I get there, I'm going to be good. And for some kids, it's really hard to handle. Like, oh shit, like I'm not the best outfielder on this team right now. I'm the 5th best guy. The kids who attack that and just go to work every day and do exactly what you're talking about, and they just try to build up that credit score, usually ends up pretty good for those guys.
It's no doubt. Like, how many times when we were all coaching, and JJ, you obviously still are, like, how many times have you had to yell at outfielders to get out of or yell at pitchers to get out of the outfielder's way during BP? Like, yeah. The amount of time, like, there's times where I'd have to stop practice and be like, will you stop running down, like, stop taking their live reads? Because it was always in the fall. Like, by the time we got to spring, it was never really an issue. And I'd be like, listen, there's going to be days where there's going to be one outfielder out there and you guys can go do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. But when you see multiple guys trying to get live reads, stop taking their live reads away. Because what's going to happen is we're going to get to the spring and someone's going to misplay a ball and you guys are going to be pissed that we didn't take the right read or catch that ball that you thought was catchable. And we could all pull this back to you guys taking all of their reps. When here's a newsflash for you, you're literally never going to play in the outfield here. Like, I will not, like, you're not going to get a lineup. The only way you're in the lineup is when you toe the rubber. Like, you ain't going to play in the outfield. So stop taking their live reads away. And like, I think that sometimes, like, you know, like, you can look to some of those things. It's like, man, like, you can get, like, kids can get, especially outfielders, like, you get so many, and obviously infielders, like, you can get so many live reads at game speed during batting practice that, like, can get you further ahead if you take them seriously. If you're not going to, like, yeah, you're probably not going to get as further ahead. But, like, you know, we got to the point where guys were laying out in BP for balls, and then, like, all of us, like, weird, all of a sudden guys are laying out in game. And maybe we don't make the play, but kind of what Billy had talked about when he was on, and, like, now pitchers start feeling a little bit more confident throwing, like, all right, man, like, these dudes are laying out for me. Like, I got to bear down and get an out here. Like, and all of a sudden, like, when you have that, it's like, damn, man, like, we could be really, really, really good if we do it this way. And you know, I think, like, that practice aspect of it, like, you know, how many high school kids come in and actually have gone through a full college BP at practice where, like, all right, guys, we're going to tee it up for the next hour and 15 minutes. Like, have some fun out there, pitchers. Like, yeah, no doubt. You know, and the worst part is, like, you have to start inventing jobs for pitchers to do during BP just to keep them out of the outfield. Like, no doubt. Right, like, you three are on the bucket. I need you catching up at first. I'm going to put another screen over here. You catch up at first, and then they're spinning double plays. And I'm like, all right, I have 7 other pitchers. Are like, all right, seniors, just stand on the fence. Like, don't care what you do. Just stand on the warning track. Just if someone hits a home run, go get it. Like, I don't care what you do.
Very true.
All right, we're gonna hit you with the closer here, JJ.
You go for it.
Drop some knowledge on the listeners here. What piece of advice would you give kids and parents that are going through the process? You could give multiple pieces of advice.
Yeah.
But any parting words for families and players that are going through the process right now?
Right now is loaded. Is I think the biggest thing that I would tell them is talk to people you trust. Talk to people you trust and make a decision that is the most realistic for you in the long run. Because what I'm seeing now, and it works on multiple levels, is if you don't make the right decision the first time, you are going to get in trouble, because like if you're not at the right spot, you're going to probably have 3 semesters and they're going to ask you to go, especially with all this roster craziness. So do all of the research, do all of your work. And I say this, we have camps coming up, and I'll legit call a kid and say, hey, you come to our camp. And he goes, okay, coach, I would love to come to camp. And I go, and this is why I want you to come to camp. I want you to see if you like me as a person. I want you to see if you like my coaching style, if you can handle my language, if you can handle how I talk, if this is realistic, like if I'm too sarcastic for you and you can't handle that and that doesn't fit you well, like you need to know all of that. And because I just look at this a lot and I go, not everybody's going to get along with my personality. I'm a New Yorker, man. I talk fast and I probably swear too much. I go, that's just who I am. I go, that's my foundation. But you need to know that walking in and not find out 4 months in. They'd be like, oh, Coach Edwards and I are not, we do not vibe at all as human beings. We do not. And I think that gets lost up because people see the school and they say, no matter what, that's like, that school is my dream school. And then they forget everything else under it because they get caught up by the title, but they forget who the author is, if that makes sense. So I think the research and doing research and calling other people and asking hard questions, like I don't get enough hard questions in this recruiting process. Like I want hard questions. I want questions that you've really thought about. Hey, coach, I saw you sign 5 shortstops. I'm a shortstop. Like, what does that mean for me? Like, that's a tough question. Let me answer that thing. So I think people just get caught up in like the catch and they forget kind of all the steps to get there. And they just want to be like, well, I got to the school I wanted to. And you're like, yeah, but does that coach fit you? Like, does that program fit you? Does that style of play fit you? Like, oh, you're a 7-7 running left-handed hitting first baseman and you want to go to Wofford? Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, that's not a good fit. That is my number one thing, especially as roster limits and everything starts changing, is research more than you feel comfortable. Get somebody you trust to make phone calls and an understanding of it, because you need to get it right. You need to get it right. I know you can transfer in the portal's a thing, but that doesn't mean you want to do that. Get it right the first time and get all the information you possibly can.
Love that. Yeah, I mean,
very mature answer.
Yeah,
JJ. And I think
I got 2 kids now. It's over.
I'm gonna. The reason I say it is because I think Traz talked about this, and it was something that I learned when I became a head coach. Like when you're an assistant, everyone you can kind of get along with everyone for the most part. Like,
agree.
I'm a head coach. Like all of a sudden, those relationships change overnight, and it's a little bit of it's a far different thing. And I think when you it's super important as a head coach, but also for the kids to understand, you might get told no because you might think I don't think that this kid's going to fit well with me. And that's okay. It's not anything negative on the kid. You very well might be able to play at Wofford, but you might not be able to handle you. And that's right. Okay, because in the long run, you're not, it's not going to end well for you. So you'd rather know on the front end, and I'm the same way. Obviously I'm from New York. I swear way too much. I know that. I know that there's people can't, there's certain people that I don't fit them well as a personality. And like, it took me a little bit longer to realize that, but I think that that's like, it's a great answer, because I think sometimes like it does get overlooked, and you spend so much time with your coaches when you get to college. Like, you have no, like, you think you spend a lot of time with your high school and drop ball coaches.
30, it's 30 to 40 hours a week. Like, you better like me or get numb to me. Those are the two options.
Right. And like, that's in the fall. Like, 30 to 40 hours in the spring is like, we've been signing, people have been forging the 20-hour a week stuff for years. Like, oh, doubleheader, 4 hours.
It's a game. It's a game day.
Our
3 hours for game days.
4.5 hours. Like, no, man. Like, we were on the field at 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, we didn't get off till 7:30. Like, no, you spend a lot of time. We're not even taking into account the 5-hour bus ride we got to take, and then sit in the hotel and do all that. Like, you spend so much time with them that like you do want to make sure. And I do think, like, and again, I'm hammering this point home because I think it's something that is overlooked in the process. Like, you want to make sure that you do get along with the coaching staff. Like, not that they're going to be your friends, like they're going to coach you and they're going to hold you accountable to do these things, but like that you actually, like, you can get along with their coaching style and how you are going to get coached, because like that's not changing. Like,
right.
You're a upper 30s year old head coach who's a father,
36, brother. Yeah.
36, married with 2 kids. Like, you're not changing. it just is what it is. Like, this is how I am. This is what it's going to be. And like, either get used to it, or, you know, hey, this might not be the good fit, and that's fine. Cause you're going to tell kids no, and kids are going to tell you no. It doesn't matter either way.
Right. Exactly.
Get to know your coaches. They will have way more of an impact than you could possibly think. Good or bad. I mean, it's really that simple. And your recruit, like, they need to do the same thing that you're doing in the recruiting process in terms of they're trying to figure out, hold up. You're trying to figure out, do I want to coach this kid for 4 years? Well, the kids need to figure out, do I want to play for that guy for 4 years? And if you can check that box, there's a lot of other things on the periphery that don't matter as much as people think, because of how much time you're going to spend with the team and with the coaching staff. Like, if that box is right and some of the other things that are important to you add up, that's a really important box to check, because your experience is going to be defined by the people that you're around.
Right.
4 years, period. And if you're in the right culture and you're with a coaching staff that you respect more than anything, and you know that they have your best intentions in mind, that's a pretty good place to start in the recruiting process.
Agreed. I mean, I heard in grad school, I was in grad school as a teacher, and they go, do you think in 20 years they're going to remember you teaching them the American Revolution, or they're going to remember who you are as a human being? And I go, and it's the same thing. I go, you're going to remember how I'm teaching you cutoffs from the outfield? I go, you're going to really remember that at 20 when you're 36 and, 20 years down the road and you're 36 and you're looking up with 2 kids and 2 dogs, and going to be like, man, I remember my coach talking those cutoffs, and man, he can coach the crap out of those cutoffs. Or you're going to be like, man, I really liked him as a person. I go, that's what it's going to shake out to be.
Oh, it's true.
100%. Well, it's been a blast. Appreciate every second of it, man.
It was enjoyable.
Maybe we'll get you on here with Grasse. We'll have a little.
Yeah, that's going to have to have like the explicit next to it if it's Grasse and myself. And it's going to have to be 5 hours, because Grasse and I were like the guys, we sat next to each other at camp, and we're like, did we just kill 9 hours of a camp with a good conversation? Like, that's how Grasse and I work.
He's the best. He's the absolute best. But
so I appreciate it, guys. You guys were awesome. I appreciate it so much.
We'll be in touch, and obviously we're watching. So best of luck. Best of luck to Wofford, and look forward to having you on again, man.
All right, boys. Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, JJ.
All right.
Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.